name is Saturdaii, and I'm here to fix a problem that I feel needs to be addressed. Furries, well, not just furries, but most people I meet just don't seem to know how to be an adult. Now, what do I mean by being an adult, you say? No, not being proper in public, or doing proper maintenance of day-to-day things. Although I'm pretty sure there's some people who really need a refresher. But no, rather that people that don't get to learn properly and end up flailing aimlessly figuring out or don't even bother to try. Now, I want to provide you the ability of what I know, as well as others as time goes on, to help teach you an informative and hopefully not too boring way. Now, I have the attention of a dog chasing squirrels sometimes, so I'll do my best to attract you with something colorful. Now that I'm done with the semantics, let's get to what I'm really here about today.
So let's start things off slow and talk about what credit is. Credit, from the Latin credit, he, she, it believes, is the trust which allows one party to provide money or resources to another party where that second party does not reimburse the first party immediately, thereby generating a debt, but instead promises either to repay or return those resources or other materials of equal value at a later date. In other words, credit is a method of making reciprocity formal, legally enforceable, and extensible to a large group of unrelated people. Credit has been documented to be around for multiple millennia, as there's been studies to show that ancient civilizations have used clay tablets to keep track of trades and credits given to each other. This is to avoid the cumbersomeness of valuable metals, livestock, or whatever the people valued at the time. This helped make it much more manageable for people to follow and repay their debts, especially when they couldn't pay all up front at the beginning of the purchase. Of course, credit has evolved, and you would start to see a closer equivalent of what we recognize as credit today. Back during the 1800s with the Western expansion, there would be merchants who would create what would be known as charge plates or charge coins. These would be used to help track the debt accumulated by farmers who would later pay back for machinery, goods, or services needed immediately. Farmers would later pay back these debts after they'd harvested their crops and sold off their cattle. Eventually, this would evolve more as some department stores or oil companies would offer their own type of credit cards, but these functioned more as a way to create loyalty with their customers rather than actual credit cards of what you would normally think, as you could only use these credit cards at the places which they were originated. Now we jump to post-World War II, and this is around the time that we would really begin to start seeing credit cards to be more akin to what we know today. The biggest Kickstarter was the Diners Club card, which allowed its members to make purchases for food or entertainment on credit, and the intention was for its members to pay off all the debt that they have accrued at the end of the month. After only 1 year after its inception, it had over 20,000 members, which definitely got some heads turning. These cards were still made out of cardboard or celluloid and were the first instance of a true charge card. It wasn't until American Express came into the picture that we could really see the more modernized styles of credit cards that we see today. They started to make their credit cards out of plastic rather than the typical cardboard or celluloid, and by 1964, over 1 million cards were out in the ether, with over 80,000 merchants accepting these cards worldwide as payment. Members were still expected to pay off their whole balance every month with these cards.
Now you have some big banks that have some serious FOMO issues going on, and they want to find out more ways to make money off their customers. If that's no big surprise. This is where we get the final ingredient that creates the credit card that we have today. That special ingredient, you may ask? Well, that's allowing members with credit cards to not having to pay off their full balance at the caveat that they are assessed a nominal fee, nominal, and have that fee be applied at the end of the month for keeping said balance. Now, I'm sure you already know what this is called. If you don't, it's called interest, and it can be your worst enemy. But more on this later. Eventually, MasterCard and Visa form out of these banks that offer these credit cards, and soon Discover falls right behind, leaving the 4 major networks that provide the different options available. Think Avatar with the 4 elements, but they all share the same element: crippling debt. Now, you may ask, what the fuck is credit and why do I need it? I'm doing just fine without it. Well, sort of yes and sort of no. I mean, if you're one of the lucky few trust fund children that get to actually just pay for everything and have everything handed to you on a silver spoon, I guess you don't technically need the credit per se. But I mean, honestly, if you can pay everything without having to worry in the world, I guess this video isn't for you. And you should just probably go away. Just press the button. Get out of here. Get out of here! But honestly, most people won't have this wonderful luxury as the world does continuously turn. That being said, from the lucky few, you will need credit for a plethora of reasons. Now, what is credit and what should it mean to you? To be blunt, it's what's used to help banks and lenders decide whether or not you're worthy of the risk to be lent money to. Pretty straightforward. Now, how do you rate yourself? You're curious, I'm sure, right? Well, what most commonly is used is done by the Fair Isaac Corporation, or FICO for short. Your FICO has a scale ranging from 300 to 850, and where you can fall, that scale has the biggest determining factor, but not the only factor that can allow you to do things that involve credit. You can easily find out your credit score at all 3 major credit bureaus from the annualcreditreport.com website. And yes, I know it's not a government website, but this is legit and not bullshit like Credit Karma, where they really are more intent on making money off of you than giving you fully up-to-date credit scores about you. Now, I'll leave that link down in the website below in question, but please keep in mind that only your credit report is free from each agency once every 12 months. Now, credit can be extremely important for a lot of things, from buying your first home or car, or even loans for college, all the way down to paying bills or getting cell phone plans. A great example is how some utilities may have you pay for a down payment for their services before you even get them. Having a good credit score can help you skip out on this down payment. It's even possible for you to get new jobs. Yeah, that's right, your credit score can affect your standing for getting a job now. I have no idea why the credit bureaus are doing this now, because they don't even have any legality on doing this. They're just stating that, hey, maybe you shouldn't hire this guy because his credit score is lower than others. And the problem is that there's a lot of job places that are actually falling for this, unfortunately. So you got to be careful about that. And, you know, it could totally ruin you for getting a job. A great example of this, which doesn't necessarily have to do with credit per se, but say if you want to get a nice bank job, you know, and you end up filing for bankruptcy, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean anything with credit, but no banks will ever hire you again. It's like this weird rule where they're like, no, you fucked up financially yourself, we're not going to hire you. Kind of a weird concept, right? Now that you have a bit of an idea of what credit is, let's discuss on how you build it. The easiest way to start building credit is to be added to somebody else's line of credit, or have somebody co-sign with you. Maybe get added as an authorized user on your parents' credit card, or have them co-sign on a vehicle or a car note. Now, it's pretty common for a lot of parents to add their children when they come of age to their credit cards. Usually credit card companies allow at the earliest age to be at 13, and they can be added as authorized users. Now, AU doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have a credit card per se, but this just allows them to show up on the credit report, which can help build credit. So if your parents have really good credit and they add you to the list, even if you're not allowed to use the credit card, it allows you to build credit. Hence why you will see some people who just have obnoxiously large credit lines, and it's not necessarily because of them, it's because their parents were responsible. So keep that in mind. Now, nothing against your family, I promise, but there is one of those things where it isn't always best to rely on them. Now, what do I mean by this, do you say? Well, they may add you as an authorized user, but just because you're added on there doesn't always mean it's going to help you. Maybe your father's constantly maxing out his credit cards for cash advances to pay off his mistress. Or maybe your mom is wasting money on online gambling sites, ranking up high balances and being delinquent. It only punishes you, and you're on that train of addiction of debt. Now, I'm not saying to go to your parents and go, hey, add me to your credit card so I can adult. But it wouldn't hurt to ask them and have a good conversation about it. Typically, if your parents are responsible enough, they'll probably already could be doing this for you, and you can have faith that your family actually loves you. Ooh. Spicy. Now, what if you happen to find yourself in a circumstance of being a poor Bruce Wayne? You may not be able to find a family member to help you out, but you could always try to see if you can find a close friend who's willing to be able to rely on, or someone that can trust you with their account. Although, you know, they can still make sure that it's, you know, someone that you can trust as well, because, like I said before, even if you're an authorized user and you're not financially responsible for it, you're still going to get affected by it if they screw up. But I'll get more on this later. But what if you don't have a friend or family member that you can rely on to be added to as an account, you ask? Surely there's another way. There is, but it's not going to be easy or cheap, unfortunately. The next best step is to get a secured credit card. Typically, these are the best ways to start credit, although you have to do it all on your own. You'll usually have to deposit money whenever you do this, and this can be anywhere from $50 to $500 out of your own pocket before you even get the credit card. Now, to be fair, you can get the money back eventually from these credit cards, provided that you keep the account in good standing and don't become delinquent and pay it all off. Now, if you go down this path, that's totally fine. Sometimes this can be the best decision based on the situation that you're living in. So sometimes getting this card could be working in your best interest. First, don't worry about getting a high credit line. Just worry about getting the card itself, as that's what really matters. If in the end the credit line ends up being only like $500, that's more than enough to help kickstart your credit. Higher credit lines can get you in trouble, and sometimes it doesn't hurt to ask for less if you feel that it's too much, or if you feel like you might spend it on things that you don't need. 2. Now, typically you do get low APRs already, but try to look for the lowest APR that you can for a secured credit card. Now, the reason why I bring this up is that I'm not necessarily one to tell you to keep a balance, but it is one of those things where if you need money fast, say like for a car repair bill, or you know, something in life happens that you just can't seem to pay the money up front, having the credit card there will hold the balance for you, and if you have a lower APR, that's less interest that you have to deal with. But I'll go more about interest later on in the video. 3. I'm running out of hooves. I need to stop. Most secured credit cards don't usually have benefits to you because they aren't meant to be anything else more than utility, rather than you earning benefits. Now, if you get benefits, great, but that's not what you need to worry about when you're trying to build your credit. Save your benefit choices for when you go for a non-secured credit card. 4. Okay, if I have any more, I'm screwed. How to use it to your best advantage. Focus on only buying things that you know you need. A great example of what I did when I first started with my credit card was I used it specifically for filling up for my gas tank only and paid off the balance when I got a bill. Now, this totally sounds boring as fuck, but it helps make sure that you build up discipline and helps keep you from digging yourself into a hole. The best way I can handle using a credit card first off the bat is buy things that you know you're going to buy with your credit card. Don't spend your money on other shit. And then when you get your bill at the end of the month, go pay off your bill. It's super simple. All it requires is just a little discipline. Now, I'm not going to come to your house and bitch at you for how you use your card, nor will anyone else for that matter. But be smart with it, and for the love of Chanka, don't be delinquent. If you can make a payment, even if it's a minimum payment, do it. If you use your card for the intent of building credit, you'll be essentially shooting yourself in the foot by being delinquent, and that'll defeat the whole purpose of building credit in the first place. Now, what kind of teacher would I be if I didn't go over the standard practices for applying for a card?
You fucking shit, Saturdaii.
True, but I think it's probably best that we go over it regardless, because I know some of you are going to need your hands held. Come here. Come on, I'll hold your hand. Now, whether you're applying for a secured or non-secured credit card, the process will absolutely be the same. The first thing you should do is research. And that's not something I want to do for you, nor anyone else. Yeah, exactly. Here comes the fun adult part that no one likes. Like setting up your own appointment to the doctor. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging on what to expect, because honestly it's rather daunting and there's a lot of bullshit to wade through when getting a card. Now, what are the key things you should look for in a card? What kind of benefits would most suit you? I'm pretty sure you're asking. Well, that really depends on what you like to do. Are you the kind of person that likes to travel a lot or go to cons maybe? You should maybe look in for an airline card that's not Delta or Spirit. With these kind of cards, you'll see this kind of thing common with a lot of other cards I'll mention today, but most of the time these cards will be aimed towards you using services with them. Let's say you like flying a particular airline. Chances are they'll offer a card that you could use with them. Maybe you like getting free checked luggage when you fly with them. You'll earn miles for day-to-day purchases, which in turn will get you free flights for hotel stays, car rentals, all kinds of bullshit. It really just depends on who you're with, but it can be really helpful if you have these kind of cards and you use them properly. Most of the time when you make your purchases, you only get about 1 to 3% on purchases that you make, but this can add up if you play your cards right, and I'll go over that later. You can even earn a large point bonus on sign-on packages whenever you sign up for cards, but buyer beware, most of the time you have to meet certain requirements like spending $1,000 within the first 90 days or do some other nonsense shit. You gotta pay attention if you want to make sure that you get that. Maybe you want a cash back card. These cards can help you earn money back just by spending money. It's actually kind of nice. Although, to be fair, usually you have to spend $1,000 and you might only get $10 to $20 back at best. So keep that in mind. You can also look for utility cards that offer super low APRs. These kind of cards can be great for in case of emergency situations when you run into an unforeseen situation like a large medical bill or car repairs that you might not be able to pay all up front. It allows you to get on with your life and allows you to pay it back over time with less interest, or sometimes no interest at all if you're lucky. Typically these kind of cards don't really give you any kind of rewards to earn points per se, but they aren't really meant to help you earn rewards, but rather give you super low APRs because that's their main selling point. How about a card that focuses on you going back to school? These cards are pretty common around the average college kid's wallet and helps make it easier to pay back loans or books or any of the other essentials that you need for school, because college is a fucking bitch. I'm still paying on that shit, Jesus Christ. These can come in handy when you don't get enough coverage with scholarships or grants that you may or may not have been able to get to make that financial hell that is college just be a little bit more bearable. You can even get credit cards for timeshares and... Don't ever get timeshares. Now, one of the things I will say is try to avoid department store credit cards. The problem is with these is that a lot of them try to shoehorn you into only being able to use your card at their store. Yeah, you might be able to get great benefits and good sales and stuff that you like from that store, but if that's your only credit card, it can hurt you pretty fierce and pigeonhole you to not being able to do anything. You can pick and choose between these cards and see what has the most pros and cons for you, but always be sure to read the fine print on those rewards, because these rewards have certain rules and restrictions that can be put in place but aren't explicitly shown to you up front, even if you do agree and aren't savvy enough to notice, or you probably just aren't arsed enough to bother to read it. Also, be sure to look at the network benefits with the cards that you have interest in too. Now, by networks I mean the network providers that help the cards run. Amex, Discover, MasterCard, and Visa. These guys can also provide great benefits as well. A lot of these can range from travel to like free or partial coverage for car rental insurance, free extended warranties on durable goods, travel insurance when your airline cancels your flight because they installed the engine on your plane upside down, free concierge service, even phone insurance when you break that shit doing some weird ass Mersuit video. After you found the card that's right for you, now it's time to apply for it. But what all do they want, I'm sure you wonder. Make sure that all your data that you submit, whether it's over the phone, online, or in the mail, is accurate as possible. Don't use nicknames. Make sure you use your actual address and phone numbers that are associated with you. The reason being is that typically most companies will do background checks on you to make sure that you are who you say you are. And if you try to do something that doesn't line up with who you say you are, you could get flagged and declined even if you have a great credit score. Typically, they're going to ask about your income, so be sure to include everything that you earn every year. Now, to be fair, when the company background checks on you, they can check your work history and things like that as well, so try to be honest. Most of you are probably going to have one job or maybe a couple jobs depending on what you do. You can do a ballpark roughly of what you make annually when submitting, but you want to make sure that you don't go too crazy. The reason why they do this is that they need to find out what is an acceptable line of credit to give to you. Debt to income ratio is a serious factor that they take in while reviewing your information. And if you don't have any lines of credit or don't owe any money or any notes to anyone, it shouldn't hinder you too much. But if you have a mortgage, a car note, 2 other credit cards with carrying balances, you may not get a card, or rather you could get one with a really low credit line. I'm not saying that you can't tweak the amount of money that you earn every year for what you submit, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Because of this, if you do too much, the credit card company catches you in a lie, they might just drop you outright. The other thing is you need to decide on whether or not you want to have a cosigner or not. Sometimes you need a cosigner when it comes to getting your first apartment or car or even a credit card. Cosigners are fully responsible as much as you are for the aforementioned things that you are able to go for, which can be nice as it can keep both of you and the other person in check and to not abuse the account. But this can have drawbacks as well. Just because both parties are liable doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't going to follow that. That's just life. And I'll get more into this later. Once you've applied for the card and filled out all the information, all you have to do is just sit and wait. Sometimes you can find out in just as little as a few minutes. Sometimes it can take a week. It really just depends on the bank that's providing the credit card. Now, what to do if you're declined? Don't panic. It's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, it sucks because not only is it damaging to your credit score, but it's also damaging to your psyche. But don't fret, because just because you were declined doesn't mean you aren't bad with your credit. Typically, they will contact you in regards as to the reason why you were declined. Maybe you gave the wrong info about yourself or outdated information that didn't match with the bureaus, and they needed to re-verify some of the information to make sure you are who you say you are. Maybe you have too high of a debt-to-income ratio or no existing credit score. Having no credit history can make it really hard, but remember, if you're having to go it alone, go for the secure credit cards, so that way you can have a path to start on. Also, analyze what they give you information-wise in terms of credit decline, so that way you can fix it or alleviate it for the issues that caused the decline application in the first place. The ideal thing to do is not to go right off the bat and apply again. Doing credit card pulls on your account can be rough. It can cause ramifications that you might not like if you abuse the system per se.
Where's your sense of adventure?
So, you got yourself a credit card. Great job. Do you know what you're gonna do with it? Well, that's okay. Well, aside from buying things, do you know how to manage your balance and keep track of it? Do you know how much interest accumulates on your balance when you don't pay it off? What about when you need to make payments? Does your statement cycle? How do you read your statement? How to manage your spending limits? Balance transfers? Cash advances? Adding authorized users? Well, don't worry, Slugger. We'll go over all of that too.
Let's go over the basics of what your statement is and how cycles work. This will be the foundation of knowing what to pay and when to pay every month. The first thing we want to start with is what's called your cycle date. The cycle date is what decides when your due date is. Now, what a cycle is essentially is a full month of posted purchases contained within that cycle. So that I can make this as easy as possible to explain, let's say your cycle date starts on the 5th of every month. This would essentially make your cycle closing date on the 4th of every month. The information will always be stated on your statements. So let's just say March 5th is the first day of your cycle and you decide you want to make purchases for whatever is needed. You'll go out and make said purchases on the account, and they'll show up as temporary transactions anytime you complete a purchase. Temporary transactions are what's used to help track your account and make sure you don't go over your available credit. But it also allows for the merchant to adjust the amount of money that should be charged if need be. It's not until the merchant confirms the amount needed for the charge that then it'll show up as a posted transaction on your account. Posted transactions are confirmations that the transaction is fully complete and the funds have been transferred to the merchant you bought the service or goods from. Typically, transactions can take 2 to 3 business days to post to your account, and that's usually controlled on how long it takes for the merchant, or rather the systems as it's usually automated, to process the transactions. Now, why do temporary transactions exist in the first place? There are some really good reasons as to why. Some merchants use it to help make sure that the card is valid and active, like gas pumps or merchants who only sell things online. Sometimes they'll actually place a separate charge on your account to make sure the card is active before they can complete the transaction with the proper amount. Then after the transaction posts, they drop off the small charge that they made on your card and give that back, only charging you for the original amount that you intended. Another great example is when you go out to eat and plan on tipping your server. Which you better be fucking tipping your goddamn servers. They bust their ass for $3 an hour and live off those tips. Anyways, when you tip your servers and use your card to tip them, the merchant will need to make adjustments for this. Let's say you spent $30 on a meal and the server did a great job and you'd like to tip them. Usually they will bring your receipt, but you don't have any cash to tip, so you decide to tip them on the receipt. Let's say you give $10 as a tip, totaling out to $40. If you are savvy enough to check your transactions on the internet for your credit card for the temporary transaction, it would show that they only charged $30 to your account. But once the charge is confirmed and posted by the merchant, it would save $40 to help accommodate for the tip that you plan to give to the server. Partial or full refunds can work in this way as well if you happen to get buyer's remorse or if you were charged incorrectly for the goods or services you wanted, and they can even fix them before it posts. The only time they can't make adjustments for said refunds or adjustments is when it's already been posted, and at that point they would need to process a completely different transaction where a chargeback would take place, giving you your funds back to your card. This would typically be notated on your own statement with a negative amount. Let's get back to your cycle we mentioned previously before, and yes, I am wearing Christmas lights. Just deal with it. I decided to have a costume change in the middle of recording. You can deal with it. Let's just say that your cycle ends on April 4th. Sometimes you can make a purchase near the end of this cycle. It could possibly not post until after April 4th. And what this can cause is for you to still owe on the balance on the card, like you normally would, but you wouldn't have to pay for it until June. This sounds a little confusing, I'm sure, but I'll get more into this on how it works. Aside from that, how do we figure out when your due date is? Well, that all depends on your grace period. Grace periods are what's used to help find out when your due dates are. Grace periods are anywhere from about 25 to 28 days. This is the time frame that's allowed for you to be able to make a payment on time. Typically, most people end up making it on the due date, which there's nothing wrong in that, but this is the time that you need to make a payment by in order to not be delinquent. With us going by the example of your cycle date ending on the 4th, let's just say your grace period is 28 days. With this time frame in mind, this would make your due date on the 1st of every month.
But Saturdaii, that doesn't make sense. Wouldn't it be on the 2nd? You suck at math.
Shut up. Don't worry, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna lead you astray. See, here's the deal. All the months in the year don't have the same amount of days, and this would make it difficult to make your due date consistent, as it would be constantly hopping back and forth between the 1st and the 2nd. And February would be completely fucked up, as it only has 28 days. So, to make it consistent, it would make your due date on the 1st of every month. It's just easier to learn and accept it and deal with it the way it is. They've been doing this for years. No one's really had a complaint. With your cycle ending on the 4th, a statement would be created showing all the transactions, credits, fees, finance charges, and payments you've done during this time frame, as well as the posting dates for this time frame. Once the grand total is created, this would make your statement balance. A minimum payment amount would be required, and your due date would show it would need to be made by May 1st at the latest for this cycle. You have to make at least the minimum payment every month in order to avoid late fees and to keep your credit history in good standing. At the bare minimum, you should be doing this, even if it comes to bite you in the ass. But I'll get more on this later. You'll get these statements every month, and it's good practice to make sure to look them over to make sure those purchases you have on your account are all yours and are being charged properly. I'm not saying you need to keep your statements for your records. You can if you're a big stickler or if you need it for tax reasons and things like that. But you can just look them up online and have your credit card company resend them out to you if you prefer paper statements. Typically, banks keep your statements for about 5 to 7 years. So at that point, any time after that, you're kind of on your own. You can also feel safe knowing that if you lose one from 3 years ago, they can repopulate one for you if needed. The key thing is just to make sure the transactions you're making are yours and nothing fraudulent is being done on your account. But I'll go more about fraud later. The next thing I should go over is payments. And honestly, this is the easiest thing to get done with a bank account which allows ACH transfers. ACH stands for Auto Clearinghouse, and you'll probably never need to know that ever again, but some people like to know, so I figured I'd let you know. Just know that you need the ability with your bank account, and most basic checking and savings accounts already have this ability to begin with, so it's nothing too serious, but it never hurts to check to make sure. Typically, you can make payments over the phone or on the internet with your phone if you'd like. It's super easy and convenient. Be aware of cutoff times for same-day payments though. Most credit cards base their cutoff times on Eastern Standard Time, so this can come and bite you in the butt. Let's say you live in Hawaii and the cutoff time for your credit card payment is at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This would make your cutoff time at 4 p.m. your time, which may not necessarily be the easiest thing for you to do, especially if you're still at work or something. So keep that in mind when you're making your payment. You also have the option of using bill pay services with your bank as well. But be aware that banks may boast electronic payments, but that ability for them to do it with other banks varies. Depending on the credit card and the bank that you use, if they don't have a relationship, they will actually end up mailing off checks in your name instead to be processed, and sometimes this process can cause your payment to be late. Sometimes it's best with this process to pay a few days early to allow buffer time. Now, if you really want to hate yourself or you want to see what it was like to be your grandparents, you can pay by check. Typically with your statement, you'll get a payment coupon inside that you'll need to clip off, write out a check, get an envelope, fill out the envelope, seal the coupon and check, add postage, take it to the post office, and then hope and pray that you can still have faith in the USPS actually getting it to where it needs to go. Let's talk about something very important, since we're talking about payments now, and we're going to talk about interest. Interest is something that you will find no interest in having at all, and will suck you drier quicker than a fox on a horse. What exactly is interest? Interest is what's used as a fee for you to pay every month you leave a balance on your credit card. The more of a balance you leave on the account, essentially the more you end up paying. This is where a lot of people get in trouble with their credit cards. You see, the thing is about interest is that every month you allow a balance to follow over the next period, you have to pay that interest every month before you get to pay on the principal. The principal being what you actually owe for the credit card. Interest can be your worst enemy with credit cards, and accruing high balances only makes it worse. Sure, it doesn't hurt to pay minimum payment every once in a while when the money is tight or you need your funds elsewhere for something more pressing, but constantly paying the minimum payment just has you throwing your money away. Let's say that you have a balance of $1,000, okay? And you only want to pay the minimum payment. Nothing wrong with that, but I want to show you how bad interest can get if you're only paying the minimum payment. Let's just say the minimum payment is $27. With the payment only being $27, you're going to have a lot of interest built up in the background based off your balance. If you truly want to pay off only $27 a month for your credit card and you don't do anything else with it, it's going to take you about 5 years. It's going to take you about 5 years in order to pay it off. And you're going to end up throwing away about another $500 to $600 away just on interest. You're losing almost $600 just for paying the minimum payment. If you really want to do that, there's nothing wrong in that, but just keep in mind that you're throwing away money every time you pay the minimum payment. Well, what if we double that payment, instead pay $54 instead of $27? First off the bat, it's only going to take you about 2 years to pay it off. Way quicker, and you're not going to have to throw away as much money for interest. If you're paying $54 a month, you're only going to have to pay a little over $200 for interest. You're saving almost $300 to $400 just by doubling your payment every month. It doesn't seem like much when you're only paying double the minimum payment, but it really adds up the quicker you pay it off. Even if it's just a little bit, every little bit helps. Hopefully you have an idea of how dangerous interest can be, but I want to show you how to calculate it. It's pretty important to know how interest works. This is a standard formula that can fluctuate from card to card, but can give you a rough idea of what to expect. We have a few variables that we need to fill in though before we're able to do this formula. We have APR, which is annual percentage rate. We have average daily balance, which is how much your balance was during the whole cycle. Now this is an average, not just how much you've had overall. The last thing we need is the days in your grace period. This is so that way we can know how many days are going to be calculated for the sake of interest. It's a good thing to know as well with your APR that it can fluctuate. What I mean by fluctuating is that it can go up and down, and this is caused by what's called the prime rate. The prime rate is affected by the federal government, and they have it go up and down based on the economical status of our country. Recently, over the last year or so, it's actually been going up. The formula is pretty simple. You take your APR divided by 365 times your average daily balance divided by 100 times the days in your billing cycle. There is one determining factor that you will always have control of when having a credit card, and that's your average daily balance. You can control the average daily balance based on your spending habits and how you pay. A lot of people don't actually realize this, but it really matters on when you pay during your cycle, and it can affect your interest if you plan on having interest. Here's a great example. Let's say you owe $1,000 on your account, and let's just say you know you're going to pay $500 off the balance. Doesn't matter when, but you're going to pay it off. So let's say we wait all the way until your due date to pay the $500. We use our math formula. Your average daily balance is going to be roughly about $1,000, so we'll just leave it at that for now. We have a 19.99% APR divided by 365 times 1,000 divided by 100 times 28. Now this will get you a ballpark interest of about $15.30. Not too bad, obviously, because you're paying it off, but let's say that you pay a little bit earlier during your cycle. Let's say we pay at the halfway point, 14 days between your cycle date starting and your due date. Now, if you pay during this time, things get a little bit more interesting. You're still going to pay that $500, but what you're essentially doing is you're cutting down your average daily balance. Now you have 14 days that are at $1,000, and you have 14 days that are at $500. You add those up, and average amount gets you to $750 for your average daily balance. Now, this may not seem like a lot, but let's try putting it into the formula now. So let's try doing it with the new average daily balance that we have. 19.99% divided by 365 times 750 divided by 100 times 28. Interestingly enough, we get only $11.50. Yeah, we're only saving a few dollars, but it can add up, especially if you have a higher balance. Just imagine having these balances in the tens of thousands, and it adds up quick. So, it helps to pay earlier during your billing cycle, if you can. If you can't, that's totally fine. But if you want to take advantage of having the least amount of interest, it would behoove you to pay earlier during your cycle. Alright, so I think we're done talking about statements, payments, and interest for now. Let's talk about having users on your account other than yourself. This can be pretty important as well. There are 3 different types that can be available for users. One, which is the primary. The primary is the person who opened the account in the first place. This will most likely be you because you're the one opening up the credit card to begin with. The second is the co-applicant. Co-applicants, or co-signers if you want to say it that way, typically are people who have signed up with the primary. This is pretty common practice when it comes to getting vehicles or houses, but you can also have this happen for credit cards as well. Essentially what the co-applicant is just another primary. They're just called that because they happen to be the second person to sign on the list. Nothing too special about it. And the last is the authorized user. These are people that you can add onto the account to be able to use the account as well. Now, I want to go over all three of these and what the pros and cons are for each of them. Like I said before, if you're applying for the card, you're most likely going to be the primary. You have access to everything that goes along with this account provided within the terms and conditions of the bank. They are financially responsible for all transactions that take place on the account, provided that it isn't a fraudulent charge. Primaries can add and remove authorized users at their discretion, but co-applicants and co-signers are a completely different story. Co-applicants are like primaries in the sense that they also have the ability to do anything that the primary can do. They can also add and remove authorized users at their discretion, as well as they are financially responsible for everything on the account as well. Primaries and co-applicants can remove each other, but both have to agree to it amicably, or one of them has to die. That's the breaks. This can be troubling if the primary and co-applicant have a falling out, or one of them decides not to care about the financial responsibility of having the card and just completely screws over the other person entirely. So be sure, if you're getting a co-applicant or being one, to make sure that it's someone that you can trust. The last is the authorized user and can be potentially dangerous or helpful in the right situation. The best way I can describe being an authorized user is like being the kid that gets to sit at the adult table during Thanksgiving because you're too big for the small plastic chairs. As the authorized user, you get to be super excited that you get to sit there at the adults table, but you're just someone that gets to sit there while the adults talk. Authorized users also have the ability to make transactions and do minimal things on the account. They can't remove other users on the account, but they can remove themselves at any time. This is very important in case you happen to be on somebody else's account that ends up not taking care of it very well, because if you want to, you can call in and remove yourself and therefore getting it off your credit. Be wary of who you add as an authorized user on your account as well, and make sure it's someone that you can trust. Authorized users are not financially responsible for transactions made on the account, and it can be detrimental to your account if they decide to abuse it. But if you're wanting to add somebody as an authorized user to help build their credit, or you're trying to be an authorized user on somebody else's account for the same reason, you don't have to have a card. You can just be on the account with no effort and ride easy street building up credit. Authorized users also don't have the ability to take over the account as the primary. So if the primary wants to close the account or dies, that's it. No more account. Although there is a plus, because if there's a large balance, you don't have to fret over paying on the balance. You can just go off and say, bye Felicia, and the balance will have to be dealt with by the bank. The only, and I mean only exception, is the state of Wisconsin. For some stupid idea, the state of Wisconsin thought it was a great idea for spouses to take responsibility of all the debt their spouse leaves with them after they die. So even if you're an authorized user and you're married and your lover kicks the bucket, you're still shit out of luck and have to deal with that debt. So the moral of the story? Don't live in Wisconsin. No, I'm kidding, no. You guys are awesome.
Everything is good. Run for your lives!
I promise that we're almost done with this video, and if you're still around, I am super impressed. There's two other things I need to go over: frauds and disputes. Fraud is a rampant issue everywhere, and everyone can fall prey to this. It's great to remain vigilant in keeping your information confidential and safe, but you can't stop everything. The great thing with most credit cards is that fraudulent activity can be forgiven provided the bank is able to prove that it was fraud. Like it happened in a different state, or someone stole your purse or wallet and went on a spending spree. Now granted, it is there to help you, but there's definitely never ever a situation where you should abuse this. You see, banks will give you benefit of the doubt when it comes to dealing with fraud, and some will fall prey more to it than others. But don't think that your credit card company is oblivious either. If you cry wolf too many times, they can take away your privilege to report things, and then you can be in a real pickle when the wolf really shows up and causes you problems.
You know, I don't exactly know how to feel about all this.
For real, yo. The whole thing felt kind of shady, you know, like morality-wise.
Totally.
How do you feel now?
God. Wait a second. Hey, I just got it, and, are you sure this is as big as it can go? What do you mean? This is totally not big enough. That's bullshit. I want my money back. What am I supposed to do with this? You also have the right to dispute charges too, which can be really handy when it comes to dealing with merchants that do you wrong. What are some examples of disputing, you ask? What if you order that brand new kinky dildo and it never gets to you and the merchant won't refund you? Dispute it. You ordered the mersuit and the maker gives you hot garbage compared to what you were expecting? Dispute it. You get one of those femboy foxes to come back to your room and you pay them for services, but then they realize how dirty you are and they won't give you your money back? Oh, wait. Don't dispute that. You're gonna have a bad time if you dispute that. No, but seriously, you can dispute your transactions you made with the credit card when the goods and services you asked for did not meet your satisfaction, and the merchant didn't fix the problem or refused to do so, which can be great and give you an extra layer of security when buying something. You can dispute just about anything, but be sure that when you buy things, you are aware of the terms and conditions of what you're buying, as well as making sure that you have proof that whatever was done wrong can go in your favor. A very stupid and simple example I can think of is, let's say you wanted to buy 100 spoons, but instead they gave you 100 forks. Now, it's not what you ordered for sure, but the merchant says, nah fam, we gave you spoons. You can dispute this and show your credit card company that they fucked up by showing them the problem, and they'll be like, don't worry, we got you, BB. And like I said, you can really dispute just about anything. I have a very close friend who got a new fursuit, and it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Now, the fursuit maker that made it, he used to do good work. Don't get me wrong, he did a great job. But it's one of those things where if you're not going to provide the product that you intended to your customers, you should definitely be giving a refund back to begin with. And most of the time, which I've seen in the furry fandom, is that sometimes you will definitely get a suit, or they gave me this hot piece of trash to wear. The thing is that 9 times out of 10, even if it's for furry trash, banks will agree with you if you have the proper evidence. And guess what? My friend won. He got back all of his money for a suit that he spent almost $3,000 on. Now, in the defense of the artists, you shouldn't be going around abusing this power as well, because banks will definitely see if you're taking advantage of them, just like as if you were trying to abuse it with fraud. But if you have a valid reason, like the artist didn't give you what you wanted, you didn't get the right fursuit, it didn't fit right, it doesn't look right, they didn't promise on what they were supposed to deliver. The last thing overall is to be aware of the terms and conditions with your credit card. A lot of banks don't expect you to read these things, but they do a lot of things you might not agree with, like lowering your credit line, limiting your spending ability, or even closing your account at their discretion. Now, to be fair, you have to be fucking up pretty badly on your account, like not making payments or doing stupid shit with your other bills or lines of credit. This can get tricky because if you abandon one account, it will be reported to the credit bureaus, and it can come around and bite you in the butt later with your other accounts. So be careful if you decide if you want to burn bridges when it involves your credit. Well, if you made it this far, I am indubitably impressed. Yes, it was a very long video. And yes, I did go over a lot of things, and I didn't really go too much in detail about those things, but that's totally fine. I totally want to make more videos in the future, not necessarily about credit cards per se, but just mainly adult things in general. And if you like these videos, please let me know. I have some other ideas planned, but if you guys happen to think of anything you'd like for me to talk about, feel free to leave a comment below and let me know. But for now, you all have a wonderful Saturday.
And now for something completely different.